Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Metal Magdalene with Jet right here on Metal Messiah Radio. Tonight, I have a very special guest on the show. We have Brian Slagel, founder and CEO of Metal Blade Records. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Now, on August 29th, Metal Blade Records and BMG will be releasing a book for the Sake of Heaviness, the history of Metal Blade Records. So, Brian, how did this book all come about?
Well, people have been bugging me for a long time to write a book, and I was kind of like, that's when you do when you get really old or something. So I kind of was like, not really. But then we were kind of thinking about, every 5 years we have an anniversary, and like, what do we do for these anniversaries? So we were sitting around thinking, what would be cool to do this year? We've done so many different things. I was like, well, maybe this is finally the time to write a book while I can still remember everything. And, then we kind of set about, because we had to start this process about 2 years ago, started out putting it together, and then here we are. It's actually going to exist now.
And and the book talks about how you started from your mom's garage. So tell us a little bit about starting out back then, Brian.
Well, yeah, I was just a metal fan, and I was lucky enough to work at a record store. I had a fanzine. I was kind of helping out the local radio station with some metal stuff. I was booking shows of bands, and I kind of had a million hats on, doing as much as I could to help the scene. And at that point in 1981, and then the record came out in '82, there was nothing. There's a scene that existed in LA that was really cool with Motley Crue and Rad and all these other bands, but nobody knew that it existed outside of LA. There was no record labels that cared about it. There was no press. There was no nothing. This is years and years and years before the internet or anything. So I got the idea to put out a compilation album of local LA heavy metal bands, just hoping that, well, maybe if I did this, maybe people outside of LA will realize that this scene exists and it will help it out. So that's really kind of why I started. I never started this to form a record label or do anything. I was just trying to help the scene out. The record did pretty well. One of the distributors said, hey, we'll give you a distribution deal if you want to do more. And I was like, all right, well, that sounds like fun. Why not? And then 35 years later, here we are.
Hey, and when you first started out and you started needing cash flow, was your mom your first investor?
No, I had zero money. My mom didn't have very much money either. So that was the hardest part about everything in the beginning. I had no money. I just to get enough money to press up the first 2,500 copies of the Metal Master, I had a little bit of money I saved over because I worked at Sears for a couple of years before the record store. My aunt had a little bit of money, so we kind of just called a little bit together. But after that, I had zero money, and the only reason I was even able to move on was the distributor said, hey, well, we know you have no money, but, we think you might have something going here, so we'll do a pressing and distribution deal, which means they would manufacture everything. I just have to bring them something. So, and again, with no money, I just had to go to the band and said, hey, if we can record something somehow, I can put it out. And then it kind of grew from there.
And at what point were you like, I need help with this? And how did you go about finding that help?
Well, it was weird. I didn't really. The first 3 years I pretty much did it all on my own in my mom's garage, which was not air conditioned, by the way, 100 degrees in the summer. That was fun. But once it started to, because I didn't know this is going to become anything or not. I was just doing it for fun, and I loved the music, and it was an interesting thing to do. But 3 years in the garage, finally it started to kind of get a little bit better, and then I realized maybe we actually need to have other people involved. There were still other people involved since the beginning. A guy named Bill Matoyer who was there from day one, who was an engineer. Who, if it wasn't for him providing us really cheap studio time, we might not have gotten anything else done either. And people around the scene, but it was definitely about 2 or 3 years in where it's like, okay, this is getting a little bit big. I can't do it all by myself anymore, scarily enough.
And who were some of the first bands that you signed, and what advice did you give them?
Oh gosh, I don't know if they gave anybody any advice at that point. I just was a dumb kid, so I was like them. But we signed. I think the first band we ever signed was this band Bitch with the female singer. Then Armored Saint was the second one. We put out an EP for them. And then we signed a couple other bands, and then Slayer being, kind of the biggest one from there. But we also were putting out these compilation albums that had, Metallica and Rat and, a whole bunch of bands that went on to be pretty big after the fact as well. So, but yeah, I definitely wasn't giving anybody advice at that point. I was just trying to help out wherever I could.
So Brian, touch on some of what you have accomplished throughout the years and how you helped some of these bands later, like Metallica and Slayer in their careers. And again, people can read more about all this in the upcoming book. So tell us a little bit about that, Brian.
Well, a lot of it was just being in the right place at the right time. And the whole Metallica thing is kind of a crazy story because I met Lars Ulrich when he was 16 and I was 18. We were just metal fans at a Michael Schenker group show in L.A., California. He had just moved from Denmark to L.A. and didn't know anybody. And he knew about what was happening in Europe, the new wave of British heavy metal, as did I. So we became friends really quickly. And this is way before we ever thought of ever doing anything. And then, I decided to put out this compilation album. He said, "Hey, if I put together a band, can I be in your record?" I said, "Sure." And he ended up putting together this band called Metallica that had quite a little bit of success over the years, I think. So that's kind of insane. And then, I went to go see, I think I mentioned that band Bitch before. They were playing a show in Orange County. And I hadn't really been to a lot of shows in Orange County, which is like maybe 30 miles from L.A. I went out there and I got there early to see the opening bands. And one of the bands opening was this band called Slayer. And I saw them and they were amazing. I think they played 2 or 3 originals and the rest were all covers, but they were incredible. So I went backstage after and talked to the manager at the time, and I said, "Hey, I'm doing these compilations album. Maybe we could do something." And kind of just went on from there. And then, just so many bands have come through. Slayer, obviously, Slayer, Metallica, obviously, and then you've got bands like Flotsam and Jetsam and Sacred Reich and Trouble and Candlemass and Voivod. I mean, kind of on and on. Just back then, I just was finding all these really great bands and being lucky enough to work with them. It's kind of extended all the way through the whole history. Even when the whole grunge thing was happening and metal was kind of on the outskirts, we did marketing promotion for Faith No More, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Mother Love Bone, a bunch of these different bands. So we've been insanely lucky to work with a lot of really great bands over all these years.
And so Brian, being a kind of a West Coast operation at the beginning, how did you expand across the United States and then of course later on through the world? We have the internets and everything, but how did you start expanding out of the West Coast?
Well, we started to get bands that were sending us stuff from outside the West Coast. I think Trouble was from Chicago, was one of the first bands we signed outside, and then Fate's Warning was from Connecticut right after that. So I started going, I started traveling a lot when I was younger, especially to New York, because there's such a big scene. You have 2 scenes really in the early 80s. You had the scene in LA, and then you had a whole other scene in New York, and a lot of the business people were based in New York. So I started coming to New York a lot, like around 84, 85, and absolutely loved New York. And in fact, I'm sitting in New York City at the moment. We started doing more and more business here, and we ended up having an office in New York for a long period of time, and then same thing in Europe. Started to go over to Europe, started signing bands over there. We were licensing material from Roadrunner and from Noise for the U.S. and started going over to Europe and seeing the scene over there. And then eventually, we decided to have a label there. And it just, metal's big everywhere, and we kind of been, running around finding bands wherever we can all over the world. It's been amazing.
And now, Brian, where do you see Metal Blade going now into the future?
Well, hopefully we keep doing the same thing. I don't think that I don't think the core of what we've done has really changed over all these years. Clearly the business changes a lot, and it's probably in a massive change right now. But we've been through that so many times that it's like, okay, here we go, something different. Let's embrace it. Let's get on board with it and see how we can make it work for everybody. And that's kind of where we're at now. So I don't think the model has changed. We have a huge catalog of bands that we have currently that we want to continue working with and putting out really good music. And we want to try to, find the next wave of bands, because that's really becoming more and more important now, because it's so difficult to break bands through now. I think in the last 5 or 6 years, really the only band that's really broken through has been Ghost, and we need to get some other bands to do that. Obviously, in this climate, it's a lot different and a lot tougher, but this is what we've done for all these years, and this is what we're going to continue to do. So I don't think the business model or how we do business is going to change at all moving forward. Hopefully, finding more really good bands and putting them out and turning people onto them, and thriving as we always have.
And so, Brian, what advice do you have, for bands that are now looking to sign with labels?
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a couple things. that you have to do. I mean, number one, I think I would say, I'm going to give advice. There's always three things I always say. Number one, it's cool to be influenced by bands, but don't try to sound like them. Take whatever your influences are, but try to make an original sound that you like, and don't listen to what everybody else tells you. Oh, you should sound like this or play like that. Do what you guys want to sound like and what you like. Because if you talk to anybody from Metallica to Slayer down to Amon Amarth or anybody, and they say, who do you make music for? It's like, we make music for ourselves and what we like. And then hopefully other people will like it outside of there. That's number one. Number two, try to get involved into whatever city you're in. Try to get involved in the local scene, radio stations, record stores, anybody in the local scene you can get to see your band and like your band is really good. Try to get on social media and do as much as you can there, because that really is a massive help. I mean, we've seen that's really changed the industry so much, especially for labels and for bands, because you can reach directly out to fans. And you have this amazing portal to reach people. So work on your social media stuff. And the third thing is you have to really, really love what you're doing and love the music. And you're going to have to pay your dues. Everybody from Slayer, Metallica, and on and on and on, all had to go tour in terrible vans, sleep on people's floors, do whatever they had to do to get out there to be successful. And you're not going to just play a couple shows, put out a demo, get signed to a label, and be a star or do well. It's a whole long process, and you really do have to pay your dues. And that's, I think, what really has hurt in the last maybe 10 years is I think bands just don't understand that you have to really kind of go through this whole process of, quote unquote, paying your dues, because it's not an easy thing to do. But if you're in it for the music, because you love the music and you want to play music for people, you don't care if you got to sleep on somebody's floor. You're out doing it and you're succeeding at it.
Now, Brian, where can people pre-order the book or pick it up once it actually is out there?
So you can pre-order the book. Go to metalblade.com, and there's a pre-order page there where you can pre-order the book. And we've got a bunch of crazy. We have a cassette package and a package with a shirt and a whole bunch of crazy stuff that we're doing. So you can get it there. Obviously, the usual channels: iTunes, Amazon, all those places. You can order it to either the physical copy or the digital download copy, and then all the bookstores when it comes out, and I'm sure a few record stores as well. So it's BMG is doing the distribution on it, and they own Penguin and Random House, the two biggest book publishers. So it should be in all the bookstores as well. It should be pretty readily available.
And now, Brian, in the book, are there lots of pictures? You know how metalheads love their pictures.
Well, there's some pictures. Unfortunately for us, although this is kind of a cop-out in the internet age, in the 1994 Northridge earthquake, we had a storage unit right in the middle of Northridge that housed all of our archives, and that whole building was completely destroyed. So we lost everything that we had there. So we kind of pieced together stuff over the years. But there's a good amount of pictures with a lot of old school stuff with a lot of the bands, Slayer and Metallica and stuff. So there's still some good pictures in there.
And speaking of visuals, Brian, when the movie comes out, who do you want to play you in the starring role?
Ha! Wow, that's an interesting question. I have no idea. That's it. I mean, look, if there's a movie that comes out, I almost don't care who plays it. The fact that there'd be a movie, it's like, wow, that's amazing. So, who knows? Those are bad decisions for me to make. I'll let some director figure that out.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show. And remember, everybody, you can all pick up or pre-order the book For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records. And it's been a pleasure not only listening to you and promoting the great bands you have signed on our station, but also working with your great staff who have always been very friendly and courteous with me. So, Brian, best of luck with the book and more success to you with Metal Blade Records.
Thanks so much, and thanks for all the support, too. We really appreciate it.